Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Go Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. So welcome everybody. Welcome to Kauri as well. Kauri is here in the farm buffet. So welcome everybody to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto, chapter 1. Today's text is text number 32. So I will recite the verse and then we can go ahead and do the translation. Katamopi na venasyat panchanam purusam prati tasmat ganapi upayena mana Krishna nivesayet. Katamopi na venasyat panchanam purusham prati tasmat kenapi upayena mana Krishna nivesayet. Katamo api na venasyat panchanam purusham prati tasmat kenapi upayena mana Krishna nivesayet. Okay, anyone would like to recite?
Gatamope navena syat panchanam purusham prati tasmat kena pupayena meda Krishna nive shayat.
Anyone else? Okay. Katama api. Anyone. Na, not. Vena, the atheistic king Vena. Syat, would adopt Panchanam of the 5 previously mentioned, Purusam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prati, in regard to, Tasmat, therefore, Kenapi, by any, Upayena, means, Mana, the mind, Krishna, in Krishna, Nivesayat, one should fix. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Somehow or other, one must consider the form of Krishna very seriously. Then, by one of the 5 different processes mentioned above, one can return home, back to Godhead. Atheists like King Vena, however, being unable to think of Krishna's form in any of these 5 ways, cannot attain salvation. Therefore, one must somehow or other think of Krishna, whether in a friendly way or inimically. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Impersonalists and atheists always try to circumvent the form of Krishna. Great politicians and philosophers of the modern age even try to banish Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita. Consequently, for them, there is no salvation. But Krishna's enemies think, here is Krishna, my enemy, I have to kill him. They think of Krishna in his actual form, and thus they attain salvation. Devotees, therefore, who constantly think of Krishna's form are certainly liberated. The only business of the Mayavadi atheists is to make Krishna formless, and consequently, because of this severe offense at the lotus feet of Krishna, they cannot expect salvation. Srila Viswanath Chakravarti Thakur says in this connection, Tena Sisupaldi Bina Pratikula Bhavam Tidisur Yena Iva Narakam Yatiti Bhava. Except for Shishupal, those who go against the regulative principles cannot attain salvation and are surely destined for hellish life. The regulative principle is that one must always think of Krishna, whether as a friend or enemy. Om Gyana Timrandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurube Namah Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Revacha Patita Nama Pavanebhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasti Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Could that have happened? Yes, it did. Somehow or the other. So the verse again, somehow or other, one must consider the form of Krishna very seriously. Then by one of the 5 different processes mentioned above, one can return home back to Godhead. Atheists like King Vena, however, being unable to think of Krishna's form in any of these 5 ways, cannot attain salvation. Therefore, one must somehow or other think of Krishna, whether in a friendly way or inimically. So again, we see there's some specific instructions being given here. This chapter, sorry, somehow the other, my screen had closed. Chapter 7:1. The Supreme Lord is equal to everyone. So this is chapter 1 that we're reading. We're now at text 32. And of course, we see this conversation is in response to a question by Parikshat Maharaj. He was asking, and Sukadeva Goswami is giving his conclusions about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although he is the super soul, friend and protector of everyone, he also killed the demons, the Daityas, for the sake of Indra. So Maharaj Parikshit is inquiring, it seems like, Krishna is partial to the demigods and not to the demons. And so, of course, in all of these verses, we are hearing how Krishna is actually equal to everyone. So many nice verses are there. So particularly in this verse 32 today, the request is somehow or other, one must consider the form of Krishna very, very seriously. Then by one of the 5 different processes mentioned, that's, I guess, in text 31 previously, Prabhupada was mentioning there's different ways to achieve mukti. Sayujya, Salokya, Sarupya, Samipya, and Sarsati. So there's these 5 different processes which one can attain liberation. So what are the 5 different names? Salokya means that after material liberation, one is promoted to the planet where the Supreme Personality of Godhead resides. That's Salokya. Samipya means remaining an associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sarupya means attaining a 4-handed form exactly like that of the Lord. Sarsati means attaining opulences like that of the Supreme Lord. And Sayujya means merging into the Brahman effulgence of the Lord. So, of course, even though these verses are mentioning that, one of these 5 different processes are there, Prabhupada in the purport, he goes directly that the impersonalists and the atheists, they're always trying to circumvent the form of Krishna. They make Krishna formless. They say God is formless. And of course, Prabhupada mentions here the great politicians and philosophers of the modern age even try to banish Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita. And consequently, for these Mayavad philosophers, the impersonalists, the atheists, and all of these great politicians and philosophers, there's no salvation for them. But if one is able to think of Krishna, then there can be one of these 4 different forms of salvation. So we understand the impersonalists, the atheists, and all of these Mayavadis. Their goal and idea is to merge into the Brahma Jyoti. They want to become one with the Supreme. And so our understanding from the Bhagavatam is that as much as the Brahma Jyoti is the effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, still one cannot have any relationship in the Brahma Jyoti. So because we cannot have any relationship, it becomes very, very dry and boring. So even though one may eventually make it to the point of getting salvation and, becoming one with the Supreme or merging into the Brahma Jyoti, still we cannot have any relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we may hang out there for some period of time, but because there's no relationship, there's no taste, no rasa in that Brahma Jyoti, then after some period of time, they eventually fall back down into the material pool. And this cycle of birth and death continues. So the whole goal of getting a human form of life is to figure out how to get out of this cycle of birth and death in the material world. And so we see that the Mayavadis, the Gyanis, they also want to merge and become one with the Supreme. But our understanding is that it is definitely not an intelligent plan. In fact, of course, these Mayavadis, Prabhupada is mentioning, the Mayavadis' atheists is to make Krishna formless, and consequently, because of this severe offense at the lotus feet of Krishna, they cannot expect salvation. So this Mayavadi philosophy, Prabhupada, of course, talks about it very, very heavily in, so many places in the Bhagavatam, in the scriptures, because once one gets contaminated with this Mayavad philosophy, it's very, very difficult to get it out and take to bhakti. So at all costs, we should try to avoid hearing from the Mayavadi atheists, especially because once they get these crazy notions and ideas of how Krishna is formless into our head, very, very difficult to get it out again. So in this way, these guys, being such great offenders, they might, get liberation, but again, continuously fall back into the material pool. So this vicious cycle continues. I guess he's got a new bike. Yes. So the only exception Prabhupada is giving in the purport is, except for Shishupal, those who go against the regulative principles cannot attain salvation and are surely destined for hellish life. So if one analyzes from the Bhagavatam, what different options are there for us to get out of the cycle of birth and death, we see there's only a few options. Of course, one of them is engaging in the devotional service of the Lord. And this is the preferred or best approach for devotees in general. Whilst the other four types of liberation can also be there, that one can also, be promoted to the planet where the Supreme Personality of Godhead resides. One can become an associate of the Supreme Lord. One can have a four-handed form, or one can have opulences like that of the Supreme Lord. Even though sometimes devotees may aspire or get these types of liberations, still our understanding from the Shastra is that the best position of a devotee is that he does not want any type of liberation, any one of these 5 different types of liberation. All the devotee wants is lifetime after lifetime service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada was giving a lecture on Bhagavad Gita 2.1, and again he was just summarizing. Sayujya, the first type of liberation, is supposed to become one with the Supreme Lord. The Mayavadi philosophers, monists, they aspire after Sayujya Mukti. But the devotees, Vaishnavas, they do not aspire after Sayujya Mukti. For them, they are the other 4 different types of liberation. And those are still advanced. They do not want any one of these 4 types of liberation. So for the pure devotees of the Lord, who are after pure devotional service, they do not want any of these 5 kinds of liberation, including the 4, which some devotees may attain. So of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the most recent incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he prays, Na danam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagarisha kamaye. So that's, of course, one of the verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita as well, 20:29. And it's also in the Shiksastakam prayers, that this is the devotional prayer of the pure devotees of the Lord. They do not approach the Supreme Lord for any kind of gain. Pure devotion means without any aspiration of any kind of material gain. So therefore, this Shiksastakam prayer is there. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I want to enjoy beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. What I want is only your causeless mercy of your devotional service in my life, birth after birth. So this is the prayer that pure devotees are making, that they do not want any kind of liberation. So this makes sense, of course, for the advanced devotees, that the goal of life is to engage in devotional service lifetime after a lifetime. Whether we go to Golok Vrindavan or not doesn't really matter, as long as we can be engaged in the devotional service. So I was remembering how Queen Kunti was also praying, and of course her most fearful prayer was, my dear Lord, please bring on the calamities, because when there is calamities in my life, then I immediately start to remember you. So we can all relate to that whenever there is some hardship in our life, some obstacle, some calamity in our life, then, immediately we start to remember God. And we think, God, please help me get out of this difficult situation. And, sometimes we'll want to bargain with God that, oh, if you get me out of this situation, I'll go to the temple for 1 month. Or, something similar. There's this bargaining going on with the Lord. So this is not the ideal situation that the devotee wants to be in, where we take Krishna very, very cheaply. We start to gamble and, make these sorts of conditions with Krishna. We just want to serve Krishna lifetime after lifetime in any circumstances, whether there's hardship or happiness. In all circumstances, we just want to engage in devotional service. So in previous verses, we read how, this material conditioning is what brings upon friendship or enemies. But, this is all because of our material conditioning that we see these circumstances. For the pure devotee, of course, he is equipoised. He does not see, friends and enemies. And of course, like this chapter is also signifying that the Supreme Lord is not partial to anyone. He is equal to all. And so we've been hearing now about so many demons that were killed and attained liberation as well. And more specifically, of course, these chapters are geared towards, how is it possible that Shishupal, he was such a great offender, always, since birth even, just, cursing and having this negative attitude towards Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we heard how Shishupal was such a great offender, blaspheming Krishna at every moment. Even, one of the previous verses was citing how even before he could speak, when he was 1 or 2 years old, first words were coming out. Even at that point, he was blaspheming Krishna. So this is how intense, So it seems like Prabhupada is mentioning that, definitely Shishupal is an anomaly situation. But still, this particular verse is saying that somehow or other we should remember the form of Krishna. And in this way, whether we remember him as a friend or enemy, in one sense doesn't matter, because, liberation will be there. So the demons, the great big demons we were hearing about, Kamsa, Jai and Vijay, of course, they had to take so many births as these great big demons. But even Kamsa, attained liberation. So as I was mentioning earlier, there's not so many ways for us to get out of this cycle of birth and death. So we have a few choices, in one sense, not unlimited choices of how to get out of this cycle of birth and death. And the Bhagavatam, of course, Parikshit Maharaj is hearing the Bhagavatam now. He had 7 days to live because of a snake bite. And the conclusion is that as a devotee, we should be aspiring for devotional service, because this is by far the easiest way to get out of this cycle of birth and death. Just by engaging in the service of the Supreme Lord, one can make rapid spiritual advancement and thereby get out of this cycle of birth and death. We see for the Gyanis, they have to do so much of austerities, so much of tapasya has to be there for them to get the goal of being able to merge or get liberation. So much of austerities are there. And we find that in this Kali Yuga, there's just so many obstacles, so much of bewilderment by Maya is there, that, it's a very, very difficult process to, perform so many austerities. We find in the Bhagavatam that in the previous ages, people were meditating for thousands of years. And we see that, in this age of Kali Yuga, the average lifespan is roughly 100 years. So, what can be done if yogis were meditating for thousands of years in the previous yugas to obtain salvation? What to speak of the Gyanis. So another reminder I was thinking about during Kartik. Kartik is coming very soon. Of course, we're all looking forward to Janmashtami tomorrow, the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in November, I think this year, we'll be observing the Kartik festival. And during this Kartik festival, which is the month of Damodar, we'll be singing the Shastakam prayers on a daily basis. And of course, these are super excellent prayers meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his baby form. And one of the particular verses, gets right down to the point. Param deva moksam na moksha vadim va na chanyam vrineham varashad apiha idante va purnata gopala balam sadame manasya veristam kimanehai. O Lord, although you are able to give all kinds of benedictions, I do not pray to you for the boon of impersonal liberation, nor the highest liberation of eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor any other boon which may be obtained by executing the 9 processes of bhakti. O Lord, I simply wish that this form of yours as Bal Gopal in Vrindavan may be ever manifest in my heart. For what is the use to me of any other boon besides this? So we see very, very nice prayer here that if we execute this 9 processes of bhakti, we can get liberation, no doubt. But what is the use of this type of liberation? All I want to do is remember your form as Bal Gopal in Vrindavan. And in this way, continue my devotional service. So I was remembering also how Bharat Maharaj, he was meditating on the form of the deer, and in his next life, he had to become a deer. Even though Bharat Maharaj, it's explained, was on the highest level of bhakti, he was practically almost close to prema, but still, even from that elevated position, he was able to fall down just because he had become attached to a deer. So Prabhupada is mentioning in this verse also about King Vena. Atheists, the verse is mentioning atheists like King Vena, however, are unable to think of Krishna's form in any of these 5 ways, cannot attain salvation. So we remember the pastime of King Vena. He was coming in the line of Dhruva Maharaj, and many generations later, King Anga, I think was his father, and King Anga could not have a son, but somehow the other, he had done a Rajasuya sacrifice, and none of the, if I remember correctly, this is the pastime, right? And none of the demigods had appeared for that Rajasuya sacrifice. So he was a very, very pious king. And he was inquiring from the Brahmanas, the Brahmanas brought it to the attention of King Vena that, we did this Rajasuya sacrifice, and none of the demigods appeared to take their portion of the results of the sacrifice. It was very, very concerning to the Brahmanas. You're such a pious king. We have done all the mantras, chanted very, very expertly, and still somehow or the other, the demigods had not come to take their portion. So of course, King Anga was very, very aggrieved, and inquired from his Brahmanical assembly, why didn't the demigods appear? And so they told him, well, definitely you were a very, very pious king, serving the Supreme Lord very, very nicely, but in your previous life, you were very, very sinful. And they gave him some process to which he can remedy the situation. And he had to do some austerities, and as a result of his austerities, a Brahman, I think, appeared and gave a pot of sweet rice. And when his wife Sunita had taken the sweet rice, in due course of time, she had given birth to a son who they named Vena. But somehow the other, Vena was a very, very sinful person. So he was just creating all sorts of chaos in the world. And there's, yeah, so much to say about that pastime. I don't want to go on too long, but eventually King Anga, because he had, such a sinful son, it's explained, he used to just kill so many animals just for fun. Even his friends that he was playing with, he would kill them just like animals. So very, very sinful personality, just creating so much of havoc in the kingdom. So, as much as parents are wanting, to have children, and we see there's so many cases, Chitraketu also wanted a son, couldn't have a son. So in order to continue dynasty and lineage, it was very, very important in Vedic times. But of course, we understand we're in the age of Kali right now. And one, has to aspire to have a devotee as a child. But in the case of Vena, because he was so sinful, eventually his father was lamenting so much that at some point his father just left the kingdom. One morning got up, having such a sinful son, he had enough of the cycle of birth and death. So as a result, he was very, very frustrated. No doubt, he just wanted to go to the forest and perform tapasya, and in this way leave his body. So this was his plan, and he executed his plan. So of course, the next day, they can't find King Anga. Everybody goes looking for him high and low, cannot find him. In the meantime, all the rogues, thieves, rascals, because there's no king, now they start to multiply and, escalate their plan of, plundering the residents of the kingdom. So the residents were suffering so much, from these rogues and thieves that the Brahmanas realized that, without a king, we have to install somebody. So they discussed amongst themselves, and of course, King Vena was the only heir to the throne. They thought, it wasn't the best idea, but we have no other option. But eventually, they got some consensus that let's install King Vena as king. Biggest mistake. So somehow or the other, they install Vena. And of course, because of his puffed up mentality, he just continued, his atheistic behavior of thinking that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, none other, and continued to terrorize, all the Brahmins, didn't want them to worship anybody but himself. And in this way, he was just in such a miserable situation in the kingdom. So eventually it turns out that the Brahmanas met again, that, we cannot allow this to continue, that the rogues and thieves are, on the one hand, terrorizing the kingdom. Is the king himself also terrorizing the kingdom? So eventually they decide to end the life of King Vena. And so in this way, they, used mantras. They were so powerful at that time, these Brahmanas, that they used mantras to end King Vena's life. But his mother Sunita was so attached to him that she preserved his body with herbs and oils and things like that. She preserved his body. So as a result, again, now there's no king in the kingdom, and in this way, again, the rogues and thieves, started to do their business, and again, the residents were in a very distressed situation. So as a result, the Brahmanas meet again, and they decide that they will churn his, I think it was his thigh bone, and create a personality from that. So as I said, these Brahmanas were no ordinary Brahmanas of Kali Yuga. They were very, very potent. So they churned his bone, I think, his thigh, and created a very interesting personality who was not very, very devotional. And gradually, I forget the end of that pastime, but gradually I think they churned his bones later on, and a male and female personality came out of that churning. So King Vena, of course, it's mentioned, very, very sinful person. Unable to think of Krishna's form, completely atheistic. So this verse is imploring us that somehow or other we should think of Krishna, whether in a friendly way or inimically. So the example is given of King Kamsa, how he was thinking of Krishna. But again, he was thinking of Krishna in his form as Krishna. And so in this way, he was able to get killed by Krishna and get liberation in that way. So very, very few personalities have this opportunity by being killed personally by Krishna and, getting salvation in that way. Of course, there's the Gyanis who do intense meditation. They're all also able to get salvation, merge into the Brahma Jyoti. But for the rest of us, what should we do and how do we get out of the cycle of birth and death? So we understood from this verse that some devotees can also get one of the other 4 different types of liberation. But the pure devotees of the Lord, they don't even want those 4 different types of liberation. All they want is devotional service, birth after birth. Okay, I wanted to read one more. Reference. But before I do that, any questions, comments about this particular verse? Somehow or other, we should remember the form of the Lord. And in this way, we can attain salvation. It's better than being a Mayavadi, better than being atheistic. If we can somehow or other remember the Lord. So prior to this, reading these verses, one can easily think that the only way is to be a devotee of the Lord. But now we are hearing that even if one is a non-devotee, one can still attain salvation like these demons did. Any comments, questions?
I have a comment.
Yes.
Excuse me. It is interesting to note that of the 5 types of liberation, 4 of them were had simultaneously by Jai and Vijay. So they had the same bodily features as Narayan. They were living on the same planet, and they were personal associates, and they shared the same level of opulence. And this seems to be typical of the residents of Vaikuntha. Also interesting to note that Shishupal appeared to merge into the body of Krishna, which is Sayujya. But elsewhere, it's stated that ultimately he resumed his position in Vaikuntha. So the appearance of Sayujya Mukti was just temporary. Eventually, his status as gatekeeper in Vaikuntha was restored. So Sayujya was not his final destination. He again attained Sarupya, Salokya, Samipya, Sarshti. And that's my comment. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Yes, there is these rare situations. And, whilst we want to learn from these, rare occurrences, similar like devotees were speaking about Putana. Putana became, of course, she went, also attained salvation, even though she was trying to poison Krishna. And so, how to get such a high position in the spiritual world, as Putana. So there is these rare occurrences, and it seems like that's why we're discussing Shishupal, that in this case, there's also a rare situation. And so it's nice to understand the circumstances around these rare situations, but for all of us in society today, we also want to make a plan to be able to get out of the cycle of birth and death, and how best to do it. So this is what we should be considering, how best to get out of this cycle of birth and death. Maharaj was also talking in the last few classes about Yayati's last son, how he immediately accepted his father's proposal. Although he was the youngest, he was very qualified. But Puru was still thinking, I should have accepted my father's proposal before he asked. Therefore, I am not a first-class son. I am second class. But then he was also expressing that, he does not want to become the lowest type of son, who often is compared to his father's stool. The Shastras, they just have all these amazing analogies, completely out of the box analogies. So, of course, there's one Indian poet, he spoke about Putra and Mutra, that Putra means son and Mutra means urine. Both a son and urine come from the same genital. If a son is an obedient devotee of the Lord, he is called Putra, or a real son. Otherwise, if he is not learned and is not a devotee, a son is nothing better than urine, because there's only two types. You can't you can't have it all. So, even in the example of Vitrasura, when the demons were running away on the battlefield, he was chastising the demons. Why are you running away? Don't run away. You are Kshatriyas, warriors. What kind of a son are y'all? Which category y'all came from? Putra or Mutra? It's your duty to fight. Even though y'all are demons, it's your duty to fight as Kshatriyas. Y'all should be fighting on the battlefield. Don't run away. That was one context. Okay, any other comments, please, on this verses of liberation? What type of liberation would I like?
Hare
Go
Krishna,
back.
Prabhu.
Nibal.
Thank you. Even though we hear the same verse, but hearing from you and your example, it's very inspiring. Maharaj has been talking about being progressive, and the nature of the world is forgetfulness. So, how do you get the determination? Like from your example, you see, like you're fully dedicated, you and Mataji, from the, from midnight to, I don't know when you sleep or when you eat, but so how do you get determination to continue, like to be enthusiastic regardless of the circumstances?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shastakrit Prabhu. You're always so kind. Personally, at least for Parijat and I, we are depending greatly on the mercy of the devotees, mercy of our spiritual master. And somehow the other, we are trying to engage in the service of the Lord. Of course, many of you know we don't have, all of these skills necessary to, be in Lord Damodar's land in Gita Nagari. As much as we're unqualified, still somehow we're trying to stay determined in the association of devotees. Of course, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj gave me this name, Dhruva Maharaj Das, somehow or the other. So I was always very, very determined. Of course, not for the right things. I, of course, grew up in a conservative Indian family, still was very, very lost for a very, very long time. But somehow or the other, by the mercy of the devotees, as I think I told my story a few times, but as I was looking for a qualified priest to do Hanuman Puja and Shiva Puja, the devotees took mercy and started to share the glories of devotional service. So somehow or the other, due to the devotees' mercy, we were able to come into contact with my spiritual master, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and take to devotional service. So yes, it is not easy, but what we find is, at least for myself, Parijata should share at some point what her thoughts and realizations are. But at least for myself, I find that my brain is wired such that some activity has to be there, some engagement that I can, apply my abilities in. And so in this way, I'm able to, do these different projects here at Gita Nagari and stay engaged in the service of Radha Damodar and the devotees. And gradually, of course, Srimad Bhagavatam class is there, this constant reminder in Gita Nagari. Of course, there's so many challenges on a day-to-day basis with farms, farming, property, equipment, cows. There's definitely unlimited service opportunities. So in this way, because I need to, be engaged in some way, my spiritual master, of course, now we're taking Shiksha from Devamrita Swami. He has, appropriately engaged us to take care of the devotees, the cows, to apply ourselves to be able to do this kind of service. So some inclination is there, and trying to stay in the association of devotees, trying to read, trying to understand the Shastra. It seems like the hours in the day get consumed. And so I'm grateful for the hours in the day getting consumed in this way of doing devotional service. Otherwise, if I wasn't engaged, what would I be doing? Of course, we used to work and had successful jobs. I would just be traveling the world, enjoying the material energy, something crazy like that. But I am forever grateful for the opportunity to perform some small devotional service. Of course, as I mentioned, not being trained in any of this, it's a new area, and we can see that Krishna somehow or the other is helping to develop Gita Nagari slowly but surely. And so in this way, I'm able to utilize this mind of mine in devotional service. And I pray that I can continue this lifetime after lifetime.
Thank you, Prabhu. Your humility is clouding your answer, but I get it. So nice. Yeah, I was remembering last week, this time, we didn't have electricity or water, and everybody was wearing headlights and panicking. But yes, a lot of austerities, but blissful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Anyone else can share their personal realizations on how they stay on the path of bhakti, or try to stay on the path of bhakti, and please share your realizations. Yeah.
chant Hare Krishna.
Yes.
I think the principles, regardless of the environment I'm in,
Mhm.
like here, say college, my parents' house, or somewhere even less desirable.
Mhm.
Those tethers to the Lord
Mhm.
make it so that the rest is just details.
Yes.
The
Nice.
difficulty, even if there are stronger material tethers, certain
Mhm. Mhm.
internal points, locations, associations.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? In the fourth canto, 23rd chapter, text 28, it's explaining there are 5 kinds of liberation, and one is called Sayujya Mukti, or merging into the existence of the Supreme Lord, or the impersonal Brahman effulgence. The word Labdvapavargyam is significant in this verse because according to Jiva Goswami, Apavargyam, or the path of liberation, does not refer to merging into the impersonal Brahman, but to Salokyadi Siddhi, which means attaining the very planet where the Supreme Personality of the Godhead resides. There are 5 kinds of liberations, and one is called Sayujya Mukti, or merging into the existence of the Supreme, or the impersonal Brahman effulgence. However, since there is a chance of one's falling down again into the material sky from the Brahman effulgence, Srila Jiva Goswami advises that in this human form of life, one's only aim should be to go back home, back to Godhead. The word savanchita indicate that once a person has obtained the human form of life, he is actually cheated if he does not make preparations to go back home, back to Godhead. The position of all non-devotees who are not interested in going back to Godhead is very much lamentable, for this human form of life is meant for executing devotional service and nothing else. So let us continue to encourage each other in executing devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Let us not try to become inimical towards the Lord or an enemy. And let us all try to encourage each other to execute favorable devotional service to the Lord. As we're hearing, even if one is inimical, one can still get liberation, but we don't want that kind of liberation. We want to go back home, back to Godhead in this lifetime, and continue performing devotional service. So thank you very much, devotees. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanande. Hari Hari Go.
Thank you, Dhruva Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.